Interstellar is not the best film we've seen from director Christopher Nolan, but it is a thought-provoking film. While most films made today feature tired, worn-out character-driven plots, which we've all seen thousands of times, Nolan has made a brand out of films that are driven by concepts. Often concepts that are new and intriguing and that we've never seen before. Films like Memento, The Prestige, Inception are named not after the characters, locations, or events of the films, but after the concepts around which they center. So too with Nolan's latest film Tenet, a name which is a palindrome that is spelled the same backwards and forwards, alluding to the concept of time manipulation the film is based on. But what do we make of the film Interstellar? The name tells us nothing, except that the story happens among the stars. It's not a great name, but to be fair, it's difficult to name the film because, in a lot of ways, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what Interstellar is about. Going through articles and YouTube video essays, you'll find people talking about the music of Interstellar, the science of Interstellar, the storytelling of Interstellar, its editing and dialogue and monologue, but very few talk about the story itself, the plot points. And some might have us believe that the story is completely eclipsed by the music, the science, the editing, the monologuing, and the spectacle. And maybe that's true. If I were to ask you, what is Interstellar about? Could you tell me? You might say, well, it's about humanity leaving Earth to find another planet on which to live because the Earth no longer supports life. And in a sense that's true, but when you think about it, that doesn't really happen in the film. The mission crew that is sent into space to find another habitable planet doesn't find another habitable planet or get humanity off Earth, not until the very final scenes of the film. What happens in the 2 hours between the moment the crew launches from Earth and the moment when the crew find a habitable planet and get humanity off the Earth? We might say, well, exploration happens. For those 2 hours of the film, we are in outer space looking for a new habitable planet where humanity can continue to live. So we might say the film is about exploration. But remember, if the crew doesn't find what they're looking for until the final minutes of the film, that means that the majority of the film is about failed exploration. For most of the film, we watch the NASA crew failing in their mission. If Interstellar is about anything, it's about failure. And on a deeper level, it's about the consequences of that failure. There's actually a pattern that develops in the film based on this sequence. The protagonists face a difficult decision. A decision is made, that decision turns out to be a mistake, and that mistake has drastic life-altering consequences which we, the audience, are then forced to watch and come to terms with. The first major example is Cooper's choice to leave Earth. He's faced with a decision. Do I stay on Earth to care for my family and be there for them and support them and work as a farmer to save the inhabitants of Earth? Or do I leave my family to rocket into space and explore and look for another planet on which the people of Earth can live in order to save his family? Of course, since we have to have a film, Cooper ends up leaving. And while we're not told in the clearest terms that this is a mistake, in the sense of failing to achieve a desired goal, it definitely holds true to the last part of the formula. Cooper's choice has immediate, painful consequences.
You have no idea when you're coming back. No idea! Oh!
Don't make me leave like this. Come on, Murph. Don't make me leave like this, Murph.
And we are forced to look on at the tragedy of that choice. I mean, just look at Matthew McConaughey's face here. That's a face you should remember, because we're going to see it again. And let me tell you, we can be sure that every time we see crying McConaughey, we know we're seeing the deep remorse of a bad decision. The second series of mistakes happens when the NASA crew is in space, exploring planets that might be habitable for human life. In the process, the crew lands on a world that consists, as far as they can tell, only of water on the surface. But they soon discover that the unique gravitational conditions create massive waves that don't exactly make for great real estate, let alone for surviving more than a matter of minutes. It turns out that the scientists that came before them had died soon after landing on that planet, and it turns out that it was a very big mistake to come to this planet in the first place. They knew going in that the unique gravity of the planet would cause time dilation due to its relative position near a black hole. And you think maybe they should have inferred these hostile conditions going in. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt. The next mistake they make is less forgivable. Once the crew finally sees the massive waves heading toward them, threatening them with imminent death, Brand, played by Anne Hathaway, makes the split-second decision to retrieve data from some wreckage 200 meters away, causing a delay that puts all of their lives in further danger. And it's clearly a bad decision because, number one, those data are useless if they all die trying to get them. And number two, they already pretty well know that the planet they are on is uninhabitable, given the fact that they are about to die. Yeah, in a sense it's an understandable mistake to make because they were under pressure and way too much information was coming at them in way too short of a time to make a clear-headed decision. Nevertheless, it was a mistake. It was a failure in judgment, which is what this movie is all about. But like I said, it's also about the consequences. The consequence of that failure is that the scientist Doyle loses his life, and the rest of the crew lose decades of Earth time, which means that Cooper loses his children's childhood, and his family, in turn, have lost having their father for decades. Once again, because Interstellar wants us to acknowledge the consequences of our bad decisions, we are forced to watch those consequences unfold. Nolan forces us to watch the pain of this human tragedy. He wants us to feel what Cooper has lost. And don't you worry, there's plenty more tragedy to come. The mission must go on, so the remaining crew put their grief behind them and face their next decision. What planet do they investigate next? The choice is between two planets, one which had been explored by a scientist named Dr. Mann, and the other by a scientist named Dr. Edmonds. They ultimately choose to go to Mann's planet, mainly because Dr. Mann is sending transmissions telling them to come to his planet. It makes sense, right? But this turns out to be another debacle because it is revealed Dr. Mann was lying about his planet. His planet doesn't favor life at all. He only lied about it so that someone would come and save him from being stranded there, which we only learn just as he attempts to murder Cooper and strand the other scientists on that uninhabitable planet so that he can presumably get away with his lie. He ultimately fails to escape, and Cooper and Brand survive while Romilly dies as a result of Dr. Mann's booby-trapped robot helper friend. Boy, oh boy, was this a mistake. And while we really aren't given time to emotionally marinate in the consequences of this mistake, since the emphasis is laid heavily on the action of the sequence, the consequences are nevertheless just as severe. Not only does Romilly lose his life, and not only does Cooper almost lose his life, but the Endurance spacecraft is severely damaged, meaning they cannot return to Earth, and Cooper can never see his family again. And woven throughout the entire sequence are scenes of his family back on Earth and the emotional devastation he created over the years by having left them in the first place.
Dad's not coming back. He never was coming back. It's up to me.
You're gonna save everybody. His dad couldn't do it.
Dad didn't even try! Dad just abandoned us! He left us here to die.
Oh, and don't you worry, we get to see crying McConaughey one more time. As with the water planet, we might be tempted to say that the exploration crew was not really responsible for the mistakes they made. They were just victims. After all, how could they have known that things would have turned out the way they did? They surely couldn't have known that Dr. Mann was lying, and there's something to be said for that. I said before that Interstellar is about failure, but I wasn't being entirely precise. Interstellar is about failure, but it's about the failure of experts and the consequences of trusting people we consider to be experts without having all of the information.
The lie. Monstrous lie.
unforgivable. And he knew that. He was prepared to destroy his own humanity in order to save the species. He made an incredible sacrifice.
No.
What goes wrong in Interstellar is that time and again, experts fail the people who trust them. Those failures have consequences, and those consequences are borne not just by the scientists who make them, but by the people who rely on the experts. If we are going to say what Interstellar is about, we must answer that Interstellar is about the peril of trusting experts. I'm not saying that this is what Nolan intended, but it is what comes through in the action that he chose to use to drive his plot. In a sense, we might think of it as analogous to a Freudian slip, and indeed, a Freudian slip that arose out of the uneasy collective conscience of the modern West. We live in a time when, instead of looking to religion or tradition to set things right in the world, to save the world, to tell us what to believe and how to live, we look to experts, scientists, researchers, academics. Yet there's a part of us, maybe a very small part, that cannot help but be suspicious of experts. We realize that experts may have proficient knowledge in a field, and even dazzling levels of intelligence, but they are still fallible people. And even the broader institution of science, which tries to minimize the errors of individuals through community, collaboration, and accountability, even that cannot stop the mistakes of individuals, or even a group of experts, from sometimes slipping through the cracks, resulting in disasters like the Space Shuttle Challenger or Chernobyl.
What appears to be a major catastrophe in America's space program, Challenger, only seconds after leaving the launch pad, according to NASA, has exploded in midair. No word yet on if there are any survivors.
These are simple incompetencies that had devastating consequences. Experts can fail us by being incompetent, but that's not the only way they can fail us. They can also fail us by simply lying to us, like Michael Caine's Dr. Brand lied to Cooper in Interstellar.
I lied, Murph. I lied to you. There was no need to come back.
The fact that a person has prolific expertise in a field does not negate the possibility of them lying to us. Even if they are held up as bastions of authority, it is quite easy for experts to lie. And in fact, I was quite surprised to discover just how often scientists do lie about their research. The documentation is startlingly abundant. You can find plenty of articles about it online. Wikipedia has a growing list of major scientific fraud, and most troubling to me was this study that found that 2% of scientists admitted to falsifying data at least once, and 14% claimed to have witnessed other scientists falsifying data, which is not a comforting discrepancy. If we assume that all of these examples are true, then these are still just the instances that we know about. There's obviously an incentive to hush over any allegations of fraud, since that would not only destroy careers but delegitimize entire institutions. So it's very likely the problem is more widespread. And just how much fraud there is out there, well, it's impossible to say. Frankly, it seems to be a major problem that is mostly swept under the rug, and we should all be deeply concerned. Experts are people we appeal to tell us what is true and how to live. But how can we trust them when they falsify their findings, when we can't be sure that an expert is not lying about what they are saying is true? Many of our experts are failing us right now in this respect. What happens when the people I trust and that I'm told I'm supposed to trust are more focused on advancing their career than the truth? Or good Lord, what if they're more concerned about their politics than about us? Interstellar reminds us that experts are still moral creatures. Their knowledge, credentials, or expertise do not preclude them making bad choices that have society-wide consequences. It's very interesting that the closest thing in Interstellar to a villain is Dr. Mann. And what makes that revelation so jarring is that all throughout the film, Dr. Mann is hailed as a genius, the best among us. It was Dr. Mann's brilliance that led Cooper and the other scientists to trust him in the first place. But Interstellar confronts us with the possibility that we don't want to think about. It's possible for people who are geniuses and experts, the people we are relying on right now, to be morally evil.
Operation Paperclip was when, after World War II, the United States gathered up a ton of scientists from Nazi Germany, brought them over to America, and even Wernher von Braun. They had Wernher von Braun run NASA. He was a Nazi, like 100% Nazi.
Good friends with Hitler type Nazi.
Yes, he ran a Berlin rocket factory where they hung the 5 slowest Jews. They would hang them out front so everybody would know, like, this is what happens when you work slow. We'll hang you. I mean, the Simon Wiesenthal Center said that if Wernher von Braun was alive today, they would prosecute him for crimes against humanity.
Yes, they would.
And that was the head of NASA. That was the head of NASA. That was the guy who got us to the moon. That was the big cheese guy. Yeah. So we were willing to put a lot of really dark things aside in order to gather up the best scientists so that the Soviet Union couldn't get them all. And they got a few of them as well. But we got how many? More than 1,000, right?
Allegedly 1,400, but I would not be surprised if, the story changes and there were more. We got the top Germans, and who do you think the top Germans were?
Yeah.
They were coveted by Hitler, Himmler, Göring,
Yeah.
I mean, these guys were... right. I mean, there were guys that we grabbed out of the docks at Nuremberg, literally, to come be part of our program.
Arc.
Oh my God, and it's endless. I mean, there's so, the ones that there was a famous guy that we got. He was the Surgeon General of the Third Reich. I mean, think about that, okay? Dr. Walter Schreiber. I mean, he was such a bad dude. He was in charge of the vaccine program. I mean, you just put those words together and your mind goes really dark, right? But we wanted him because he was an expert in vaccines, and we brought him to the United States.
Unfortunately, there are numerous examples of such Faustian deals with the devil, in which the US government alone has bargained with evil people in order to obtain their knowledge and thereby gain a power advantage, including the horrific deals with the scientists from the notorious Japanese Unit 731, human experimenters recruited for their biological weapons technology. But Operation Paperclip is so poignant, especially for Interstellar, because it's about NASA, and it reminds us that NASA, our NASA, as well as the NASA of Interstellar, was built on the expertise of monstrous people. We benefited from the work of evil people who oversaw the torture and murder of innocent victims. The fictitious characters Dr. Mann and Dr. Brand are simply inheritors of a line of, shall we say, ethically dubious NASA scientists. The question is, what do we do about all this? How are we supposed to think about this stuff? In our society, we are in the rather dubious position of being told to, quote, trust the experts, to trust the science, while at the same time not really knowing who the experts are. At best, we have names attached to studies and research papers, news articles, but we don't know the people behind those names. It reminds me of the most notorious scene from Interstellar when Cooper and Brand are arguing about whether to go to Mann's planet or to Edmund's planet. And most people remember the monologue on love since it does take center stage. Good Lord, Nolan just zooms in on Anne Hathaway's face as if to tell us this is what it's all about. There's nothing to see outside of this. So on the surface, this seems to be about love. This seems to be an argument between the subjective bias of Brand and the objective reason of Cooper. And if we take it this way, it seems like the film is arguing for love over reason, because after all, if they had only let love guide the way, they would have gone to Dr. Edmund's habitable, life-sustaining planet and would not have encountered the living incarnation of hell that is Dr. Mann. But there's just one problem with this interpretation. When you pay close attention to the whole scene, you'll notice that Brand is actually the one who makes a reasoned case based on the data, while Cooper doesn't appeal to anything but Dr. Mann's expertise and trustworthiness.
We've no reason to suspect Edmund's data would have soured. His world has key elements to sustain human life.
As does Dr. Mann's.
Cooper, this is my field. And I really believe Edmunds is the better prospect.
Why?
Gargantua, that's why. Look at Miller's planet. Hydrocarbons, organics, yes. But no life. Sterile. Find the same thing on Mann's.
Because of the black hole.
Murphy's Law. Whatever can happen will happen. Accident is the first building block of evolution, but when you're orbiting a black hole, not enough can happen. It sucks in asteroids and comets, other events which would otherwise reach you. We need to go further afield.
You once said that Dr. Mann was the best of us.
He's remarkable. And we're only here because of him.
And yet here he is. He's on the ground. And he's sending a very unambiguous message telling us to come to his planet.
Granted, but Edmund's data is more promising.
It's not subjectivity versus objectivity, or emotion versus reason. It's the cold, hard data of Brand versus the credulous trust of Cooper in an unseen expert. An expert who, as we later learn, is the last person anyone should trust. Cooper only brings up the subject of love in order to undercut Brand's data-driven argument. Because, I don't know, Nolan needs to say something about love, but like Brand says, her love doesn't mean her interpretation of the data is wrong.
The tiniest possibility of seeing Wolf again excites me. That doesn't mean I'm wrong.
Honestly, Amelia, it might.
No, Cooper, she's right. And the film bears this out. They all should have known from the evidence. The data, the data, the data.
Yeah, Edmund's data is better.
We've no reason to suspect Edmund's data would have soured. Edmund's data is more promising.
And why Brand capitulates to Cooper here and whiplashes into this love monologue is just beyond me. It's just another mystery of the film. We all hate this monologue, and if Nolan had just left it out of the film, the scene would have been great, and Brand would be making an airtight argument. But Nolan just had to sermonize us.
Love tars love. It's just like Brand said. My connection with Murph, it is quantifiable. It's the key.
Okay, I admit, I appreciate why Nolan put the love monologue in the film. Even if I don't entirely agree with what he's saying, and even if I think it's bad storytelling, I think it makes an important point, especially in the context of what we've been talking about, which is this. Motivation is important. Motivation makes all the difference. Without proper motivation, all of our knowledge, all of our data, and all of our quote-unquote objective reasoning lead to tragedy. Without love, science leads to concentration camps, human experimentations, and doctors telling people they can't see their loved ones in their dying moments, and welding people in their homes against their wills. That's where science goes without love. It leads to the good of the many over the lives of the few. It's no coincidence that in the film, Dr. Mann and Michael Caine, like the Nazis and Soviets, constantly emphasize saving the group or species instead of the individual, actual people who are still alive.
Because he knew how hard it would be to get people to work together to save the species instead of themselves or their children.
And this leads them to lie and kill, just like the Nazis and Soviets did. Dr. Mann and Brand are willing to kill the people right in front of them to save people who do not even exist yet. Great atrocities are carried out in the name of loving the unseen group rather than the seen individuals. It's only when we love the people with real faces and names, our neighbors, so to speak, the people we carry inside us, as Cooper and Amelia did, only then do we end up saving not only them, but the whole species as well. While we may want to maintain the illusion that our experts are disinterested, objective observers, the reality is that all experts, like all people, are motivated by something. At the worst, they are motivated by greed, ambition, fear, and hatred, and at the best, by love. And I don't think it's unreasonable to demand as a requirement of all experts and all scientists that they be driven by love, by the commitment to do good for humanity, reverencing people as ends in themselves, because love is the motivation that has the best of all possible outcomes. I know that's a pipe dream, and I'm not going to hold my breath until the day that scientists start singing the praises of love. But even if we can't change the world, we can still take responsibility for ourselves. Interstellar is an amazingly individualistic film. The love monologue scene is the central heartbeat of a film that is about honoring what you know to be true and honoring what you love in this confusing, uncertain existence of ours, rather than surrendering your life to others. All of us are constantly in the situation of choosing between man's planet and Edmund's planet. We are always in the position of either blindly trusting people we don't know or thinking for ourselves and coming into tune with our own values. Interstellar is a call to take hold of your own agency. Don't shirk the duty of being an independent individual. Take hold of yourself and make sure you are properly motivated by the things that make life worth living in the first place. Never surrender your agency to other fallible agents, even if they are labeled experts by the group of fallible agents called society. Whoso would be a man must be a nonconformist. We must believe what we believe not because someone else says so, but because we have judged it so for ourselves. Always listen, especially to the experts, but always question. And when it comes to trusting the experts, well, that's something you'll have to figure out for yourself as well. I don't know, maybe 90% is a good number.
Hey, Tars, what's your honesty parameter?
90%.
90%.
Absolute honesty isn't always the most diplomatic, nor the safest form of communication with emotional beings.
Okay. 90% it is, Dr. Brand.
You know, I will say that there is at least one thing that is really profound about Anne Hathaway's love monologue, and that is this. If our lives are to be governed by anything, it should not be governed by other finite, fallible people who are just like us, nor should they be governed by opaque abstractions like the crowd or science, nor necessarily should our lives even be governed by ourselves. Rather, we should be governed by something in us that is greater than us. Love, yes, but in Interstellar, love is conceptualized not in terms of physiological chemical processes, which have their origins in our bodies, but as a transcendent cosmic phenomenon. It's like something out of Aristotle or Dante. Love is what moves the cosmos, and Interstellar urges us to be moved by that which moves the universe, to be moved by that very love that moves the sun and other stars. Hey, congratulations, you have made it to the part of the video where I express my undying gratitude to you for having watched my video to the very end. And boy, let me tell you gang, that was a difficult video for me to hammer out. I am glad it's done, and I have no doubt that there are many things that people are going to disagree with me on. And honestly, that's great. This video, like all of my videos, are meant to be the starting points of a conversation and not the final word. So please hit me up in the comments if you disagreed with anything, if you agreed with anything, if you have something to add or something to take away. By all means, please let me know.